Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be solving this Create a Simple Mobile UI challenge in the mobile development section of the Pairwise curriculum. And if you are someone who is learning to code or thinking about learning to code, then you are in the right place. In the Pairwise curriculum, we have hundreds of different coding challenges, which are all designed to help you learn to code. And in this challenge, we're going to be working on React Native. So React Native is a way that you can use the React library to build mobile applications. And here in these challenges, we have a way to essentially emulate React Native in the browser environment using the React Native web library, which we're importing right here. So what we can do is we can pull out some components like view and text from the React Native web library, and then we can render those down here in our React component. So we can say render a view, and in that view render some text like this, and then we'll say some text. And if I run that code, you can see that we get some text over here in our Android emulator, and we can also switch this to be an iOS device if we want. And here we go, some text. So this is how we can use React Native components in a web environment. And again, this is just simulating how React Native works in this workspace challenge environment here. And so let's go ahead and give us some styles to work with, and we can have a container style, which is going to be flex1, height will be full height, and then let's give it a background color, and we can pass that into our view component here. So styles equals, or style equals styles dot container, and now we will have a nice orange colored background. Okay, and so now we want to build out a simple mobile UI here. So we want to build a to-do application, which will give us a list of to-dos and an ability to just update new to-do items. So let's first add some state and props definitions for our component. The component will have no props, but it will have some state. And the state will be that we're going to have a list of to-do items. And for now, maybe this is just an array of strings, and let's leave it at that for now. So we can then pass those into our component definition here. And then we can have a constructor which will initialize our state to be an items array, which is empty. And we need to call super on our props here, like this. And then if we are going to log out the current state, this.state.items, we will see that we have an empty array being logged out down here. Okay, and let's make this full screen. All right, so then let's create some more styles down here. Let's have a title style, which will just be a bit bigger, font size 24, font weight bold, and then we can make this our title. All right, this is still going to be a text, but we'll pass in style equals styles dot title, and then we can say to do application. All right, there we go. And then let's also add some padding on our container here, maybe like 12. Okay, and then we're going to need to add a text input to create new to-do items. So we can grab a text input from our React Native web library, and then that text input is going to take a value. And so this is where we can add a new piece of state up here in our state definition. We can have, we'll call this input value, and this is going to also be a string. And then we need to add an initial value of that here, empty string. And then let's just go ahead and destructure some of these things here in our render method, so we can destructure input value and items from this.state. And we can say the text input value is equal to input value. And then we want to update our state once the text input value changes. And so to do that, we can pass in this on change text prop a callback function, which will be called when the text for this input changes. So we can define that down here in our class component, and we can say handle on change text. And this function is going to receive the current text as a string. And so let's go ahead and pass this into our prop here. We can say this dot handle on change text. And then in here, what we want to do is we want to call this dot set state. And we want to update the input value to be the current text, just like that. All right, and if we run this, we will see that we do have an input here, but we need to give it some more styles. So let's go ahead and say style equals styles dot input, and then we'll come down here and create an input field like this, and we can say backgrounds is equal to white, padding maybe 4, and let's give it some margin too. And now we can see we have our input right here. And let's give it a placeholder as well. Create a new to-do item. All right, here we go. And maybe a little bit more margin on the top and bottom. Like this. Okay, so now we can type in here, and we want to create a new to-do item. So we need a button to handle creating the new item. So let's go ahead and pull in a new button component here from React Native Web, and that's going to be something we can render out right here. And I believe this is going to take a title, which can be add new to-do item. And then we're going to have an onPress handler, which will be past a function which will be called when we press or click this button. And so we can create a new function on our class here, and I'll just log out for now, button pressed. All right, and we have our button right here. It looks good. And if we click the button, we will see we have button pressed being called and logged out down here in our console. Okay, so that's looking pretty good so far. And now what we want to do is when you click this button, we want to say, we want to handle adding the new to do. So we can call this dot set state, and we're going to be updating the current state with something that depends on the current value in the state. And so the kind of standard idiomatic way to do this in React is to have a callback that you pass into this dot set state, which will be guaranteed to have the latest value of the current state when it runs. So we can define that here as the previous state, and then this is going to be a callback function, which is going to return the updated state that we want to have. And so what we want to do is we want to say if, actually let's just do it like this. We want to say items is going to be equal to previous state dot items, and then we want to concatenate the previous state dot input value on the end of that, and then we want to clear whatever the input was. So we're gonna, when someone types in here and they click this button, we want to take whatever they typed and then add it to the items list, and concatenating that is exactly what we want to do. This will combine these two things together and then return a new array for the result. And then we also want to reset this input, since this is a controlled input, to be empty or cleared again. So that is what we want to do. And now if I say learn to code and I type this, we can see that this was cleared, and we're not actually looking at the items anywhere yet, so we don't see the item in the list, but it is in fact there. And one more thing to do here is we can handle the edge case of potentially adding an empty item to the list. So we can say if prev_state.input value is equal to empty string, then let's just return the previous state. So we don't do any state update if they haven't typed in anything in the input. Okay, looks good. And for now, let's just render out a text here just as a quick sanity check. And let's just do json.stringify the items in the list. And so we have an empty array right now. And if I add some new string here, now we have that in the array. And if I add another thing, Now we have that. So it looks like this is being updated correctly. Now the last thing to do is let's just render this out in a slightly better way. And to do that, we can actually use the flat list component. So I'm going to add a flat list here. And this is going to take in a few different props. So this flat list is going to take in first a data prop, which is going to be equal to the data in our list. And in our case, that's going to be the items. And then it's going to take in a render item prop, which is going to be a function that will be called to render each item in the list. And so we can define that in our component right here, and we will come back and revisit this in a moment. And then finally, we're going to have a key extractor function, which is basically the equivalent of normally in React components, if you render out a list of things using .map. So if you had items.map and then you rendered out some UI for each item, you would need to give React a unique key for each item as a prop in every single loop of that iteration. And so here we can provide that using this key extractor prop on the flat list component. And so in this case, the items are going to be basically just the strings in our items list. And so for simplicity, we can just say each string is going to be the key for that field. And maybe this could be a unique ID in the future. Maybe you could change the handle add to do to create a unique ID for each to do item and then use that as your key here. You probably don't want to use the actual text. If someone wrote the same to do twice, then they would have the same key. But just for simplicity now, we're going to be passing in the current to do item as the key right here. All right, and then for this render item function, this is going to be receiving an item, which is going to have, I believe, we'll just call this payload, and I believe this is going to have an item key inside of it, which should be our item, which will be of type string, and then we can basically just return a new text component here, which will have that item inside of it. And this is going to be payload.item, like that. And then let's go ahead and add another title down here, which is going to say current to-dos. And we can run this code. And okay, now it looks like we are in fact passing the challenge. And let's see if this is actually working. So we can first have, let's say, run TypeScript. And that appeared here. And then we can have learn React, and then learn React Native. And then finally learn Node.js and Express. And then last, learn Postgres. And then finally, we have get hired. All right, so it looks like this is working correctly. And this is how we can build a mobile UI using React Native. And if you're familiar with React, you can see that the code is really identical to what it looks like when you're working with React. And the APIs for React Native Web are meant to mirror the APIs for React Native, such that we have things like flat list components, which you don't have normally in React. And then we have things like buttons where you have an on-press handler. So this is really giving you a brief illustration of what developing looks like in React Native, and it's very simple to learn and get started with React Native if you're already familiar with React in the first place. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you found this interesting and informative. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future. If you want to actually try to solve some challenges like this, head over to Pairwise, where we have this full curriculum of over 500 challenges, which are teaching you full stack web and mobile development and are trying to get you hired as a software developer. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we will see you in the next video.